One of the coolest things about Conquest of Azeroth is that the game doesn't reveal everything to you right away. You can spend dozens of hours leveling, experimenting with classes, and completing quests, and still discover something that makes you stop and think. Wait, the game could do that this whole time. That's because many of the systems in Conquest of Azeroth aren't difficult to understand. They're simply easy to overlook. They're hidden in ability tooltips. They're learned through experimentation. Or they're mechanics that experienced players quietly take advantage of without even thinking about them. The funny thing is, none of these mechanics are cheats or secret exploits. They're all intended parts of the game. But if nobody points them out, there's a good chance you'll never realize just how useful they are. Today, we're looking at 25 hidden mechanics every Conquest of Azeroth player should know. Some of these will help you level more efficiently. Others will completely change how you approach combat. And a few might completely change the way you think about your character. Let's begin with something that almost every new player overlooks. Mechanic number 1. Your class is built around synergy, not individual abilities. One of the biggest mistakes new players make is judging every ability on its own. You unlock a new skill. You test it against a few enemies. If it doesn't deal impressive damage, you assume it's weak. But that's rarely how Conquest of Azeroth classes are designed. Many abilities aren't supposed to shine by themselves. They're meant to work together. One skill might generate a resource. Another spends it. A third increases the effectiveness of both. Individually, none of them seem extraordinary. Combined, they create a smooth combat rhythm that feels much stronger than the sum of its parts. Instead of asking, "Is this ability good?" start asking, "How does this ability work with everything else I already have?" That's when your class truly begins to make sense. Speaking of understanding your class, here's another hidden mechanic that many players don't notice until much later. Mechanic number 2, tooltips reveal more than you think. Let's be honest, most of us skim ability descriptions. We read the first sentence, maybe the damage numbers, then we move on. But Conquest of Azeroth often hides important information in the smaller details. Maybe an ability applies a secondary effect. Maybe another spell becomes stronger under certain conditions. Maybe an attack interacts with another talent you completely forgot about. Those tiny lines of text often explain why experienced players make combat look so smooth. Reading your abilities carefully isn't just for beginners. Even veteran players regularly revisit their tooltips after unlocking new talents. Sometimes the answer to a frustrating problem has been sitting in your spellbook the entire time. Now let's move away from abilities for a moment, because here's a mechanic that's more about your decision-making than your damage. Mechanic number 3, momentum is part of your progression. This isn't a mechanic you'll find written anywhere, but it's one you'll definitely feel. Every time you stop unnecessarily, to reorganize your bags, to second-guess your talents, to run back and forth between objectives, to debate every tiny decision, you lose momentum. Experienced players aren't necessarily stronger. They simply maintain a steady flow. Quest, fight, loot, move, repeat. The game naturally rewards consistency. Instead of stopping every few minutes, try grouping your tasks together. Sell items when you're already in town. Review talents during natural breaks. Plan your next route before leaving a quest hub. Keeping your momentum intact often speeds up your progress more than any single upgrade. Here's another hidden mechanic that's surprisingly psychological. Mechanic number 4, your rotation evolves constantly. Many players believe they've learned their rotation after a few levels. Not even close. Every new ability changes your priorities. Every talent can alter your timing. Sometimes an ability that seemed unimportant suddenly becomes one of the most valuable parts of your combat. Your rotation isn't fixed. It's constantly evolving. That's why experienced players don't simply memorize button sequences. They understand why they're pressing each ability. As your class grows, your playstyle grows with it. Don't become attached to doing things one specific way. Adaptation is part of mastering your class. Now here's one that doesn't get enough attention. Mechanic number 5, positioning changes everything. Many players think positioning only matters during difficult boss fights. In reality, it matters almost everywhere. Standing a few steps closer to your next objective saves travel time. Pulling enemies into safer areas reduces accidental fights. Keeping obstacles between yourself and additional enemies prevents unnecessary trouble. Even simple movement during combat can dramatically reduce incoming damage. Positioning isn't just about surviving. It's about controlling the pace of every encounter. The better your positioning becomes, the less chaotic combat feels. Now let's look at something that many players accidentally ignore. Mechanic number 6. Downtime is the hidden enemy. When players think about efficiency, they usually focus on dealing more damage. But damage isn't always the biggest factor. Downtime is running back after dying, waiting without a plan, searching through your inventory, traveling back because you forgot something. Those moments quietly consume far more time than most players realize. One of the easiest ways to improve your progression is simply reducing unnecessary downtime. Small improvements add up surprisingly quickly. Now here's a mechanic that's incredibly easy to miss. Mechanic number 7. Information is a resource. Gold is a resource. Health is a resource. Mana is a resource. But information is just as valuable. Knowing where quests overlap. Recognizing dangerous enemies. Understanding your talents. Remembering vendor locations. Learning which abilities interrupt important casts. Every piece of information makes future decisions easier. That's why experienced players often seem much faster. They aren't necessarily reacting quicker. They're making fewer unnecessary decisions because they've already learned what matters. Knowledge quietly becomes one of the strongest resources in the game. Here's another mechanic that surprises many new players. Mechanic number 8. Small improvements multiply over time. Many beginners search for huge upgrades. A stronger weapon, a better talent, a more powerful class. But experienced players understand something different. Improving 5 small habits by just 10% often creates a much larger difference than improving one big thing. Maybe you organize your inventory better, use cooldowns more often, choose smarter quest routes, read your abilities more carefully, pull enemies more efficiently. Each improvement seems tiny. Together, they completely transform your experience. Progress isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's built from dozens of almost invisible improvements. And finally, let's end this first section with one of the most important hidden mechanics in the entire game. Mechanic number 9. The game rewards curiosity. Perhaps the biggest hidden mechanic of all isn't tied to combat. It's tied to your mindset. Players who constantly ask, "What happens if I try this?" almost always learn faster. They test talents, experiment with abilities, explore unfamiliar areas, read ability interactions, try different approaches. Meanwhile, players who only follow guides often miss opportunities to truly understand the game. Guides are excellent starting points, but curiosity is what transforms information into experience. The more questions you ask, the more rewarding Conquest of Azeroth becomes. Those were the first 9 hidden mechanics that every Conquest of Azeroth player should know. But we're only scratching the surface. In the next part, we'll dive into even more mechanics that quietly influence everything from leveling efficiency to combat, resource management, and long-term progression. Some of them are so subtle that experienced players use them every day without even realizing they're doing it. So far, we've looked at hidden mechanics that revolve around combat, decision-making, and the way your class naturally develops over time. But the next mechanics are even more interesting because they affect your progress without changing a single piece of gear. They're the kinds of things veteran players do automatically, while newer players often don't even realize they're happening. Let's keep going. Mechanic number 10. Every fight is teaching you something. One of the biggest misconceptions players have is that combat is only about winning. You defeat an enemy, collect your reward, move on. But every fight is actually giving you information. Maybe you noticed you always run out of resources halfway through a battle. Maybe one ability feels awkward to use. Maybe certain enemies force you to reposition more often. These aren't just random observations. They're clues. Instead of asking yourself, "Did I win?" start asking, "What did I learn?" That small change in mindset can dramatically improve how quickly you master your class. Now here's something almost every experienced player does without thinking. Mechanic number 11. Planning ahead is stronger than reacting. Imagine you're leaving a quest hub. Many beginners simply start running toward the nearest objective. Experienced players do something different. They spend a few seconds looking at their quest log, Which objectives overlap? Which path avoids unnecessary backtracking? Can multiple quests be completed in the same area? Those few seconds of planning often save several minutes. Conquest of Azeroth quietly rewards players who think one step ahead. Planning isn't about slowing down. It's about preventing wasted movement later. Now let's talk about one of the most overlooked mechanics in the game. Mechanic number 12, resource management starts before combat. Most players think about health, mana, energy, or other class resources only after a fight begins. But resource management actually starts before you pull your first enemy. Are your important abilities ready? Do you have enough resources to handle multiple enemies if something unexpected happens? Is there an escape route nearby? Preparing before combat usually creates much smoother encounters than trying to recover once things go wrong. Good players don't just react well. They prepare well. Here's another mechanic that often goes unnoticed. Mechanic number 13. Every ability has an opportunity cost. Whenever you press a button, you're also choosing not to press another one. That might sound obvious, but it's one of the biggest reasons combat becomes more satisfying as you improve. Using a powerful cooldown too early might leave you vulnerable later. Holding it forever means you never benefit from it. Using one ability now may delay another ability that would have created a stronger combination. Learning your class isn't just about knowing what each skill does. It's about understanding when each skill creates the most value. Timing often matters more than raw damage. Now here's something that changes how experienced players look at the world. Mechanic number 14. Travel time is part of gameplay. Many players treat traveling as if it's empty time. They think progression only happens while fighting. But experienced players know that movement is part of efficiency. Every unnecessary detour costs time. Every forgotten quest item means another trip. Every missed shortcut adds up. Good route planning doesn't just reduce boredom. It increases the amount of meaningful gameplay you experience during each session. The less time you spend correcting mistakes, the more time you spend actually playing. Let's move on to a mechanic that's surprisingly powerful. Mechanic number 15, confidence improves performance. This one isn't written anywhere in the game's systems, but you'll absolutely notice it. When players constantly doubt every decision, combat becomes slower. They hesitate, second-guess their abilities, delay important cooldowns, overthink simple encounters. Meanwhile, confident players act decisively. That doesn't mean they're reckless. It means they've built trust in their understanding of the game. Confidence comes from experience, and experience comes from trying things, not from waiting until every decision feels perfect. Now here's something that almost nobody talks about. Mechanic number 16. Efficiency isn't about moving faster. Watch two different players complete the same quest. One is constantly sprinting, pulling enemies immediately, never standing still. The other seems calmer. They move at a steady pace, rarely backtrack, rarely make mistakes. Surprisingly, the second player often finishes first. Why? Because efficiency isn't measured by speed. It's measured by wasted effort. The fewer unnecessary actions you make, the smoother your progression becomes. Sometimes slowing down slightly actually produces faster results. And now for the final mechanic in this section. Mechanic number 17. Your mindset is part of your build. Players spend hours discussing classes, talents, gear, rotations. But one of the strongest mechanics in Conquest of Azeroth isn't found on your character sheet. It's your mindset. Players who enjoy experimenting learn faster. Players who stay patient improve steadily. Players who remain curious discover opportunities others overlook. Meanwhile, players who become frustrated by every mistake often stop learning altogether. Two characters with identical gear and talents can perform very differently simply because one player approaches challenges with curiosity instead of frustration. In other words, your mindset is just as important as any ability you've unlocked. We've now uncovered 17 hidden mechanics that quietly shape your entire Conquest of Azeroth experience. But the final 8 are some of the most impactful. They're the mechanics that influence long-term improvement, character mastery, and the way veteran players seem to progress so effortlessly. And the final mechanic on this list might be the one that changes the way you think about the game the most. We've reached the final part of the video. By now, you've probably noticed that many of these hidden mechanics aren't flashy features or secret buttons hidden somewhere in the interface. Instead, they're the small systems and habits that quietly shape how you experience the game. They're the difference between feeling like you're constantly struggling and feeling like everything finally starts to click. Let's finish with the last 8 hidden mechanics every Conquest of Azeroth player should know. Mechanic number 18, knowledge compounds over time. One of the most satisfying things about Conquest of Azeroth is that knowledge works almost like experience points. The first time you enter a new zone, everything feels unfamiliar. You don't know where quests are located. You don't know which enemies are dangerous. You don't know the fastest route. But every trip through that zone teaches you something. The next time you visit, you're a little faster, a little smarter, a little more confident. Those small pieces of knowledge continue stacking on top of each other until tasks that once felt overwhelming become second nature. That's why veteran players often seem incredibly efficient. They're not necessarily moving faster. They're simply relying on hundreds of small lessons they've learned over time. Here's another mechanic that many beginners underestimate. Mechanic number 19, good habits create invisible progress. Most players notice obvious upgrades, a stronger weapon, a new ability, a higher level, but they rarely notice the invisible upgrades. Using cooldowns more consistently, checking objectives before leaving town, keeping their inventory organized, selling unnecessary items regularly, avoiding unnecessary deaths. These habits don't create exciting moments. Instead, they quietly make every future session smoother. The difference might only save 30 seconds here, or a minute there, but after dozens of hours, those improvements become enormous. Good habits are one of the strongest long-term mechanics in the entire game. Now let's look at something that's surprisingly easy to ignore. Mechanic number 20, every class rewards mastery differently. It's tempting to compare classes only by damage numbers, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. Some classes reward precise timing. Others reward resource management. Some require strong positioning. Others challenge you to make smart decisions under pressure. This means two players can have completely different experiences even if they're both playing extremely well. Instead of asking, which class is the strongest? Try asking, which class rewards the kind of gameplay I enjoy? That answer usually leads to a much more satisfying experience than simply chasing the latest tier list. Here's one of the most overlooked mechanics in MMORPGs. Mechanic number 21. The world itself is a resource. Many players focus entirely on their character, their talents, their gear, their abilities. But the world around you is constantly offering advantages. Terrain can protect you. Buildings can block enemies. Safe areas let you recover. Quest hubs provide opportunities to combine objectives efficiently. Experienced players don't just use their character well. They use the environment well. The world isn't just a backdrop. It's another tool that helps you succeed. Now here's something you'll appreciate after spending more time in the game. Mechanic number 22. Your biggest improvement happens without you noticing. Think about your very first hour in Conquest of Azeroth. Everything probably felt unfamiliar. Now compare that to how you play after several days or weeks. You move more confidently. You recognize important abilities immediately. You understand your class much better. What's interesting is that these improvements happen gradually. You rarely wake up feeling dramatically better overnight. Instead, each session adds another small layer of experience. Then one day you realize you're solving problems that once seemed impossible. That's one of the most rewarding mechanics in any MMORPG. Growth often happens quietly. We're almost at the end, and this next mechanic explains why experienced players rarely panic. Mechanic number 23, preparation beats recovery. Many beginners focus on recovering from mistakes. Veteran players focus on preventing them. Before pulling enemies, they check their surroundings. Before accepting quests, they look at their map. Before spending resources, they think about what comes next. That preparation dramatically reduces the number of problems they have to solve later. It's much easier to avoid a bad situation than to escape one. The more you prepare, the fewer emergencies you'll have to deal with. Now for one of the most important mechanics on this list. Mechanic number 24. Curiosity unlocks more than levels. Players often measure progress by numbers. Level, gold, gear, damage. But curiosity unlocks something even more valuable. Understanding. The curious player experiments with talents, tests unusual combinations, explores unfamiliar areas, reads ability interactions carefully. That curiosity creates knowledge, and knowledge makes every future decision easier. The game rewards players who enjoy learning just as much as players who enjoy winning. And finally, the last hidden mechanic every Conquest of Azeroth player should know. Mechanic number 25. The game rewards the player, not just the character. This might be the most important mechanic in the entire game. Your character gains levels. Your character earns better gear. Your character unlocks new abilities. But the biggest progression happens somewhere else. It happens to you. You become better at recognizing enemy patterns. You make smarter decisions. You understand your class more deeply. You stop repeating beginner mistakes. Those improvements don't disappear if you create a new character. You take them with you forever. That's why experienced players level new characters so much more efficiently. Their characters may start at level 1. But the player behind the keyboard never does. And that's one of the most satisfying parts of Conquest of Azeroth. The game isn't only rewarding your character's journey, it's rewarding yours. Those were 25 hidden mechanics every Conquest of Azeroth player should know. Some of them are obvious once you hear them. Others are the kind of lessons that players accidentally discover after weeks of playing. The important thing to remember is that Conquest of Azeroth is a game that rewards curiosity, experimentation, and patience. You don't have to master every mechanic overnight. In fact, part of the fun is gradually uncovering how everything fits together. Every session teaches you something new. Every mistake makes you a little smarter. And every new discovery makes the game even more enjoyable. Now I'd like to hear from you. What's a hidden mechanic or useful trick that took you way too long to discover? Leave it in the comments. You might end up teaching another player something they never knew. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Conquest of Azeroth guides, beginner tips, hidden mechanics, class breakdowns, leveling advice, and myth-busting videos. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck on your journey through Azeroth, and I'll see you in the next video.